I immediately transitioned to moving backwards, reloading, and continuously moving the entire time. Let's go check our action.
Transitioning with AR. Using the two cardboards, we're not shooting steel this close. Just want to reiterate on the communications is on the Peltor Contact 3 with the Disco 32 push to talk.
Welcome back again. I am Josh with Grim Results. Today we're going to be comparing and contrasting the Flir breech and the Jerry C thermal clip-on device. So I've already basically covered quite a bit of the Flir breech on my last video. I'll touch on a couple more of the specifications, just comparing it to the Jerry C in this video. So primarily we'll be discussing the Jerry C and its capabilities in relation to augmenting your night vision capabilities. So we'll start off with kind of a negative aspect to both of these, okay? The Flir breech, right off the bat, one of the most irritating things is going to be the buttons that control the device on the bottom. Yes, they're rubberized, they're rugged, they're meant to take abuse, but they're also a pain in the ass to activate, to manipulate, or to just generally go through the functions of the device. I'd find myself really having to mash on these buttons in order to get them to activate. Unless you get your fingers placed just right, then they're fairly easy to use. With gloves on, you're mashing the crap out of them to get them to work how you want them to. The Jerry C is fucking expensive. That's the biggest downside to this thing. Granted, it is half the price of an American-made E-COTI, which is close to $10,000 last time I checked, and I have not been in the market for one of these for a while now because they're damn expensive. Another negative aspect to the Jerry C is going to be your on-off activation is with this little spinning wheel down below on the bottom side of it. Very easy to activate. It's very crisp, very audible click once you rotate it from off to your on position, and then from there it's very easy to spin the wheel to get your brightness, your illumination to where you would want it to be at. But that's also a negative side of things, is that it is very smooth moving. There's a very little resistance to it, and if you're not careful, you'll max out the brightness right off the bat, which isn't always a bad thing. But if you're in a a highly crowded area of, let's say, people or objects, and everything has a very unique thermal signature that the Jerry C is trying to outline or highlight, it's going to get very busy in your PVS-14 view, which is not the end of the world, but it is kind of a pain in the ass because it can so easily be cranked all the way up or all the way off. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind there. Talking about the negative side of things, again, the Flir breech comes standard at a 1 power viewing. So instead of having that baseline 0 magnification to it, it does have a 1 power magnification right off of the bat, which does tend to kind of mess with people's vision. I'm able to kind of get past it after a little while, but at first it does kind of bother me and throw me off, where I really have to kind of focus to work my brain past it until it's adapted or adjusted to that view. Another negative side of things too here, the Flir breech, it's very large. Okay, it is the size of a monocular, so it is a standalone unit, which is nice, but that's also a downside to it, is that it is big, it is bulky, and it does take up room, and it will need its own spot on a bridge, just to be a standalone unit. Whereas the E-COTI, or the Jerry C rather, fairly small, fairly compact. I happen to have the extended battery cap on it currently. I'll swap it out real quick. This allows me to utilize a 18650 battery, which is rechargeable. It's nice. I could not find any stores locally that carried these. I did have to order this online, so that was kind of a pain in the ass, especially after spending so much money on the unit. So with the standard CR123A battery cap on there, again, you can see it's a very small profile. Side by side, it's half the size of the Flir breech, no matter which way you look at it, which is nice until you clip it onto your PVS-14. Once you have it clipped on your PVS-14, now your PVS-14 just massively gained weight, gained size. It doesn't feel very heavy, but once you have it mounted to your PVS-14 and then mounted onto your head and now it's sticking out past your helmet, you'll feel the weight difference, and it's quite possible that it will start to irritate your neck, especially if you have gotten used to just the weight of a PVS-14 and then you go throwing this on top of it. Just expect your neck to know the difference. So keep that in mind, especially if you have the extended battery on. So as far as negative aspects to either one of these, I think that's going to generally cover all of that. The only other negative thing I could think to touch on right now is just going to be the fact that the Jerry C is very good at what it does. And primarily, I run it out of the 3 modes. I run it on the outline mode. The other 2 modes is a highlight mode and a low light or a thermal mode. Again, I generally run it just on the outline mode. And again, if you are in an area where there's a lot of objects or a lot of people, there's a lot of stuff happening, the Jerry C will highlight the shit out of everything. That becomes very busy. It becomes kind of hard for you to be able to identify what's exactly being highlighted without having to focus on everything individually to kind of sort through the noise, if you will, of what the Jerry C is displaying. It's not always a bad thing. Crank the brightness down just a touch, and then you can just focus on what you need to focus on. But that is a negative aspect to it, is that it does highlight, or it does outline the crap out of some stuff, and that could get very busy on your PVS-14s very rapidly. So we will go to the good sides of both. The Flir breech is very budget friendly. You can pick these up generally around $2,500 brand new. Used, you should be able to find them considerably cheaper than that. But brand new, $2,500 ain't bad. It's about on par with some of the lower end night vision. And depending on where you get it at, maybe even some of the higher end night vision. Flir breech, it does take an internal CR123A battery, or it can be externally powered by a battery pack. The Jerry C can also use a CR123A battery internally, or you can change it out to the extended battery cap running the 1860 battery, or it has a port in the back to run a external battery as well, which is nice. It is nice having that option of the three, depending on what it is that you're running it on. For instance, when I run this on my my BNVD binos, I generally take off the 18650 battery and I will run a CR123A just to try to help keep that weight down. Since I run a battery pack already for my binos, I don't want to have another external battery for the Jerry C. I just don't feel like putting that much weight and strain on my neck. So I just go with the CR123A battery when I'm running it in that configuration. The Flir breech, whether you're running it standalone or on a bridge mount, if you're running an external battery, it does not seem to really save you a whole lot of weight. The Flir breech is pretty hefty. That little CR123A battery doesn't really seem to make a big difference. If you're running a standalone, I suppose you can feel a difference between it being empty and having a battery loaded, but I don't think it's very significant. Maybe over long periods of time of wearing it, that's where it'll really start to kind of play a part in there. So moving on to some of the other good benefits or added benefits to each one of these. Again, the Flir breech can be standalone. You can mount it onto a dovetail by itself. It can be oriented either direction, top vertically, which will give you a horizontal screen, gives you a larger viewpoint horizontally, or you can rotate it the other direction, so now you have more view vertically. And the screen will rotate internally, so you get all your controls and everything like that will adjust with whichever orientation you do have it in. The Jerry C is limited, but you can adjust where it sits on your PVS 14. I happen to have mine over here towards the inside area of the PVS 14, so when it is on a bridge, you can see my bridge is completely closed here. That Jerry C is going to be all up in the middle of my nose area. I'm not a big fan of that. Okay, and when I mount my Flir breech into here, it becomes very crowded. That is a lot of stuff happening. So I'm not a big fan of that. I prefer to try to keep it down below as best I can. And honestly, I really don't even like running the E-COTI while on a bridge setup. At least not using the Wilcox bridge, just because of the position that it does hold the PVS 14. And I typically run it over the PVS 14 on my left eye. Even if I am running it in this sort of a configuration with the Flir breech and the PVS 14, I typically run the PVS 14 always on my left eye, unless I have duals, simply because that's just kind of how I grew up before optics that were night vision passive friendly. So I always grew up having that night vision over my left eye. My brain is used to it, my eye is used to it. Keeps my right eye free for natural lighting, keeps my eye free for using magnified optics on my rifle, stuff like that. And so I just kind of carried on keeping the night vision primarily over my left eye, unless I am specifically trying to train or practice my passive aiming. Then I will obviously shift it over to my right eye, but generally then I'm using my duals anyways. So Flir breech it's a great device. Again, very budget friendly cost wise. It is very handy that it can be a standalone unit, and it is very nice that with it being able to be a standalone unit, if you're trying to outfit your entire family or group with night vision, you don't always have to buy PVS 14s. You could buy Flir breeches, and this can be a standalone unit for somebody in your family or your group, and they'll still be able to see in the dark. They won't be able to differentiate through the device whether something is a light source or otherwise, but they'll have the one naked eye available for that purpose, but they won't be able to see any infrared which is a downside to it, but it is nice that it can be a standalone unit. Jerry C's, allegedly, they do offer some devices or pieces that will mount to this projection cap. And so it can be ran or handheld and looked through like you would a normal monocular. It can be held up to your eye. You have to put your eye super close to it, and you can see through it and look at it like it's a monocular. It is a very small, limited area that you see through it, as opposed to when it's projecting onto the PVS-14 viewpoint. So the Jerry C does not have a further detection range than the Flir breach, although the spec sheets kind of argue otherwise. The Flir breach spec sheet, it's saying that the Flir breach detection range, using the Johnson criteria, which is a 1.8 meter tall man, is 335 meters away. I can tell you right now, the Flir breach can see a lot further than that, and it can detect the heat source from a human further than that. Now, whether it's going to highlight it in outdoor alert mode at that distance or greater, it's kind of tough to say. The outdoor alert mode it's a very crazy mode, but I thoroughly enjoy using that mode. But I do believe in white hot or black hot, you might be able to see that human shape and be able to recognize it as a human shape at that distance. Whereas the Jerry C touts on its page that in order to detect a human size heat signature, it can detect it out to 1,000 meters, 1,088 meters. You can recognize that it's a human shaped heat signature out to 270 meters, and at 136 meters and closer, you can actually identify the human shape or human heat signature that you're observing. Jerry C did go a little bit further into detail in being able to give you distance for objects, which is going to say that you can detect a heat signature for an object out to 1,472 meters. You can recognize what kind of object it is out to 368 meters and identify that object at 184 meters and closer. So with the videos that I'll be showing you here shortly, I think it's arguable. It was not, most of the video footage that I shot was all within 400 yards or just past 400 yards. Around there is going to be the furthest that I was taking any of these videos from. At 200 yards, yes, I can identify my truck in both of these. Yes, I can identify my dogs in both of these. But you can absolutely see the dogs at 100 yards, because dogs are small. It appears to just be some sort of a heat glob, and as it gets closer, you can start to actually make out the details to it, which I would say is definitely closer than 100 yards away. The Flir breach, at about 100 to 150 yards away, I can clearly make out their dogs, and the closer they get, the more the heat signature starts to focus on the eye area, the mouth area, the feet, and the paws. But at the whole time, I'm able to recognize the animal through the Flir breach. And at one point, I'm looking out towards, at several points, I'm looking out towards a highway of vehicles driving through. The Flir breach is detecting them, especially in outdoor mode where I'm filming it. It's detecting the vehicles way out there, but it's only showing up as a tiny little black speck on the gray highway. And then as it gets to a certain distance, okay, then it changes that color fluctuation, puts that little orange to it to identify that there's a significant heat signature there. And because the headlights are on, the Jerry C doesn't really seem to highlight the vehicle at all. I think the headlights and brake lights on those vehicles is just so overpowering on the PVS-14 itself that it's too bright. It just overpowers the heat signature that the Jerry C would be trying to show you. Because you can clearly see other heat signatures all around it, but because of those light sources, it is difficult. But the Jerry C is programmed to have a breathing mode, which means your heat signature that the Jerry C is projecting into your PVS-14 will kind of flash on and off in a breathing motion. It'll fade in, it'll fade out, fade in, fade out. which is nice for being able to identify, which helps to identify whether something is a light source or a heat source that's being so bright, such as a suppressor. A suppressor, when it gets hot, is clearly visible under night vision. With a Jerry C, if it's looking at it, it'll be able to highlight the suppressor as being hot, but then as it fades out, you'll be able to identify, oh, okay, it's not an actual light source. Just seeing the residual heat signature, the glow of the suppressor through the night vision, as opposed to if you're looking at like an incandescent light bulb, which is very hot, and you're seeing it both thermally through infrared, and you're seeing it through the visual aspect of things. The Jerry C having that breathing function can help you identify, okay, it's not just a heat signature that I'm seeing, it is in fact a light source. And so this way you know you can either avoid that area, that situation, or whatever you need to do. The Flir breech doesn't have a breathing mode, any of that. Okay, so the Flir breech, I don't think any of the pallets are really going to be more advantageous than the other to identify whether something is just heating, if something is hot, or if something is actually illuminating. I think no matter what, you're going to be up a shit's creek without a paddle if you're trying to detect illumination through this, because that's not what it's made for. So again, the Flir breech as a standalone model or bridge with a PVS-14, it does occupy an entire eye space. So with it occupying that eye space, it's going to, I don't want to say restrict what you can actually see, because that's not a correct description. But more or less what I'm trying to get to is that with the Jerry C mounted onto your PVS-14, you can get the best of both worlds. You can get your night vision capability, and you can get your thermal capability without occupying both eye spaces. So now you can still maintain that naked eye to be able to observe anything and everything in your environment with the naked natural eye, such as being able to tell what kind of moonlight is affecting your terrain, whether the moonlight is actually breaking through the trees or if you're seeing the light reflecting off of other objects around you. So the Flir breech, if you're running that bridge, you won't be able to see that. You won't have that capability because now you've got both eyes occupied. Your peripheral is obviously going to be very dark unless you go stumbling into an extremely well-lit area. Then it kind of defeats the purpose of having night vision and trying to stay in the shadows anyways. So one of the most important aspects to this video that you'll see here shortly is comparing and contrasting the view of what these are actually both phenomenal for, which is augmenting or supplementing your night vision capabilities. So the first portion I was running both of these on a bridge, and I had technical difficulties with the Flir breech, and it pisses me off because the Jerry C performed beautifully. It performed perfectly for the exact scenario that I'm trying to explain and articulate why you need thermal to supplement your night vision. And that is a bright light source projecting on the side of a building which has an open face and is completely engulfed in shadow that night vision cannot see because of the bright light source on the outside of that building. And the Jerry C, perfect outline of my silhouette target within that shadowy area of the open face of that building. So I reset everything and I corrected my technical difficulties with the Flir breech and did it again. And now the Jerry C is not picking up the silhouette, and it pissed me off considerably. I was standing in the same general area using the same light source, and I'm not quite sure why the Jerry C wasn't picking it up on the second time. The Flir breech performed perfectly, had no issues seeing right into that shadow, obviously, as you should be able to trust it to do so. Being that it's solely a thermal. So that's the main reason. That is the biggest scenario to have the thermal sensing ability with your night vision, is for those exact situations. So you don't have to actively aim an IR illuminator into that shadowy area to be able to see into it, which if other people have night vision, obviously you've just given away your position. And so the thermals allow you to see into there without giving up that position. And that's primarily why a lot of us get into thermals, is to be able to maintain that that invisibility in the night. And so the Jerry C, you'll just have to play with it a little bit and kind of figure it out and how you like it and which modes you like to work it in. I typically only use it in the outline mode. Otherwise it just seems to get a little too busy. I'm not a very smart person, so I like to keep things simple. You'll see in some of my other videos, I do highlight, I do take footage specifically to illustrate the distance that both the Jerry C and the Flir breech are able to detect objects and to highlight or illuminate them. The Flir breech, again, definitely does a little bit better job of using the outdoor alert mode. Does a little bit better job of indicating that vehicle heat signature, but not until it gets to about 300 yards and closer. The Jerry C, it's really hard to see if it's even highlighting the vehicle out there, because again, the headlights and brake lights are kind of drowning out the night vision, or drowning out the thermal signature that you would have cast onto your night vision device. But otherwise, the Jerry C does phenomenal. It tends to highlight a lot more in the terrain than the Flir breech does, which is good and bad, because it's highlighting a lot of rocks, it's highlighting depressions, footprints, gaps in the sand or the dirt, breaks in the soil, bushes and stuff like that, whereas the Flir breech is very tolerant. It shows you everything. And there's a part where I'm going down a very, very steep hill with my dogs, and you can see that it's picking up the dogs clearly, and you can see most of the terrain fairly well. But if you're trying to scan out past you a good 50 yards or so, just to observe any large rocks you might be coming towards, neither the Flir breech or the Jerry C is going to be perfect for that. The Jerry C, you're really going to have to stop, mess with your brightness to kind of identify which are rocks, which are depressions and stuff like that. So they both have their negative sides in that regards to being able to detect your environment around you for your situational awareness for your feet and where you're stepping. So neither one of these devices are perfect. Neither one of them are going to be the creme de la creme or the cream of the crop. They both have their faults. They both have their merits. If I had to give one a thumbs up and one a thumbs down, I would say for sure Flir breech gets the thumbs up. Jerry C gets a thumbs down, and 90% of that reasoning is just because of the cost. It's almost twice as much as this. So you could buy two of these for the price of one of these. It doesn't really seem like it's a very, very good compromise to buy one of these. So if it's in the budget and you can afford to, this is a great tool, a great device. You'll be very happy and pleased with it, as long as you train with it. Well, we keep getting back to this every video. If you're not going to use the shit, don't fucking buy it. Don't waste your time, don't waste your money. If you buy it, use it. If you don't have a way to use it, save up, budget, buy knockoffs. This is a genuine Wilcox bridge that I got on eBay for a quarter of the cost of it, brand new. And it's genuine. I checked into it. So if you know what you're doing, you know how to find things and find deals, it's very possible to get genuine, high quality parts at a very, very good cost, very good price. I bought both of these thermal devices. I bought them brand new. I didn't want to skimp on those. I wanted to get the full experience of these devices being brand new. Wilcox, stuff like that, these dovetails for the PVS 14s, I can afford to buy knockoffs or buy used ones, and they'll suffice and they'll make do. But especially because of how much these two items cost, I use the shit out of them all the time. If I'm not going to use them, I might as well sell them. I'm not going to have them sitting in the safe doing jack diddly squat all day or all year. So do your research, do your homework, figure out what it is that you want, what it is that you need, what is the problem you're trying to fix or the problem that you're trying to solve, and then make your very fair based and researched decision on that, solving that problem. Every problem has a solution. These are just two possible solutions for that problem. If your budget can afford it, there's hundreds of other options that you can get into. But if you're on a budget, you're trying to get into thermals to supplement your night vision capabilities, these two are phenomenal options. There's even more thermal options. Infinity makes a shit ton of affordable stuff that you can get into. The Jerry C is some of the more expensive items that they do carry. But, god damn, what a cool piece of equipment that is. To have the thermal overlay right on top of your PVS 14. You'll see in these videos coming up, it was worth every penny. I do not regret buying this one bit. I use it all the time just because, even if I don't need to, well, because I paid so damn much for it. That's why I use it all the damn time. Yeah, so I hope this information helps you. I hope I am able to illuminate your opinion or your idea on what kind of thermal it is that you're trying to get into, what it is exactly, what problem it is that you're trying to fix. Because like I said, there are many options out there, many different solutions to every problem. 1,000 ways to skin a cat, as they say. And these are just two different ways to skin the same cat. And both of these are phenomenal options. Again, I hope the information's helpful. I hope you get something out of the video. If you do, I'd like to hear about it. You can just leave a comment down below. Feel free to subscribe, send it to a friend. I'm all about just sharing this information, helping you guys out. I paid full price for all of this stuff, all these thermals. So you don't have to. If you can find one that's used and extremely discounted, by all means, if that solves your problem, go for it. Make sure you train hard so you can rest easy.